The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lumiere like bullets, each drop a reminder that tonight was going to be a war zone. Inside Seattle's most prestigious restaurant, the atmosphere matched the storm outside perfectly. Marcus Chin stood behind the mahogany hostess stand, his usually immaculate appearance completely disheveled for the first time in his 3 years as general manager. His black suit jacket hung open, his tie was loosened, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the dining room's perfect climate control. At 28, Marcus had built his reputation on flawless execution and attention to detail. Tonight, that reputation was about to crumble. "This cannot be happening," he muttered into his phone, pressing it so hard against his ear it hurt. "No, I understand you're sick, David, but do you realize what tonight is? The Morrison wedding. 300 guests. Food critics." He hung up and immediately dialed another number, his fingers trembling slightly. Behind him, Lumiere's dining room was a study in understated elegance that had taken 2 years and $500,000 to perfect. Crystal chandeliers cast warm, honey-colored light over tables dressed in pristine white linens. Each table featured a centerpiece of white orchids and baby's breath, arranged by Seattle's most expensive florist at $200 per arrangement. The view of Elliott Bay through the rain-streaked windows should have been romantic. Instead, it felt ominous, like watching the Titanic approach an iceberg. "Marcus!" The kitchen doors burst open with enough force to rattle the nearby wine glasses. Elena Rodriguez emerged like a tornado in chef's whites, her usually perfect appearance completely disheveled. At 35, Elena had earned her position as head chef through 15 years of relentless dedication and an almost supernatural ability to maintain composure under pressure. She had worked in Michelin-starred kitchens in New York and Paris, had trained under James Beard winners, and had never, not once, lost her cool during service. Tonight, that composure was nowhere to be found. Her chef's hat sat crooked on her dark hair, her pristine white jacket was stained with what looked like hollandaise, marinara, and chocolate, and her brown eyes held the wild look of someone watching their life's work implode in real time. "Please tell me you have good news," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he expected the opposite. "Carlos quit," Elena announced without preamble. "Just now. Via text message. 1 hour before the Morrison wedding." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face so quickly he thought he might faint. "Carlos the pastry chef? He can't quit. Not tonight. Not ever. Apparently he can and he did. Something about creative differences with management and not being appreciated for his artistic vision. He cleaned out his station, took his knives, and walked out. What about his replacement? His assistant? What replacement? Marcus, pastry chefs who can handle a 300-person wedding don't grow on trees. And Carlos never trained an assistant because he was too possessive of his recipes. Before Marcus could fully process this disaster, Jake Sullivan appeared next to Elena, looking like he was about to hyperventilate. At 24, Jake was one of their most promising line cooks, but right now his face had gone completely pale and his hands were shaking. "Marcus," Jake gasped, "we have another problem. David just called from the emergency room." "The emergency room?" Marcus asked, though a part of him already knew this would be the final nail in the coffin. "Food poisoning. He's been throwing up for 2 hours. The doctor says he's severely dehydrated and won't be released until tomorrow at the earliest." Elena's face went from flush to ashen. "David is our sous chef. Without him, I'm trying to coordinate a 300-person wedding completely alone." Marcus leaned against the hostess stand, feeling dizzy. The Morrison wedding wasn't just any event, it was the event that could make or break Lumiere's future. Richard Morrison, the tech mogul who owned half of downtown Seattle, was marrying his fiancée Sarah in what was supposed to be the social event of the year. The guest list read like a who's who of Pacific Northwest power players, CEOs of major corporations, tech billionaires, politicians, celebrities, and 3 food critics from major national publications who could make or destroy a restaurant's reputation with a single review. The contract was worth $200,000, but more importantly, success tonight could establish Lumiere as the premier event destination on the West Coast. Failure could destroy everything Marcus and Elena had spent 3 years building. How bad is it really? Marcus asked, though Elena's expression already told him everything he needed to know. Catastrophic, she said bluntly. I can handle the main courses with my remaining team, but the dessert station is impossible without Carlos. We're talking about individual plated desserts for 300 people, plus a wedding cake that took him 3 days to design. And without David coordinating, I can't manage both the kitchen operations and the service flow. As if summoned by their conversation, Amanda Walsh, their 22-year-old hostess, appeared at Marcus's elbow. Her usually bright smile was replaced by barely contained panic, and her normally perfect blonde hair was starting to escape its professional bun. Marcus, she said in a voice that was trying desperately to remain professional, Table 12 is asking about their appetizer course. They ordered 45 minutes ago, and they're getting pretty upset. 45 minutes? Marcus felt his heart skip several beats. Why haven't they been served? Because we're drowning back there, Jake interjected, his voice cracking with stress. Tony tried to handle the appetizer station alone after we got the news about David, but he's burning everything. Half the orders have to be completely remade. Marcus looked out over the dining room with new eyes, and what he saw made his stomach drop. What he had perceived as elegant ambience now looked like a beautiful facade hiding complete chaos. Guests at several tables were checking their watches and frowning. Servers moved between tables with apologetic smiles and empty hands, making excuses that were becoming increasingly difficult to believe. And in the center of it all, at the head table decorated with white roses, gold ribbons, and $500 worth of imported French baby's breath, sat Richard Morrison himself. The billionaire tech mogul was checking his phone with the expression of a man whose patience was wearing dangerously thin. What are our options? Marcus asked Elena, though he already feared the answer. Cancel everything and prepare for lawsuits, Elena replied without hesitation. Or somehow perform a miracle in the next 6 hours with a team that's already falling apart. The kitchen doors swung open again, and Tony Baldacci stumbled out like a soldier retreating from battle. His chef's jacket was splattered with what looked like hollandaise sauce, marinara, and something that might have been chocolate ganache. His face was flushed red from the kitchen heat, and his usually steady hands were trembling. Elena, I can't do this, he gasped, leaning against the wall for support. The appetizer orders are backing up faster than I can cook them. I've burned 3 pans of scallops, the salmon is overcooked, and I think I'm having a panic attack. Take a deep breath, Tony, Elena said, but her voice carried no real comfort. She was barely holding it together herself, and everyone could see it. This is a complete disaster, Amanda whispered, twisting her hands nervously. What do we tell the guests? Some of them are already asking to speak to management. We tell them nothing, Marcus said firmly, though his voice lacked conviction. We figure this out. There has to be a solution. What solution? Jake asked, his voice rising with desperation. We're down 2 key people on the biggest night of the year. Unless you know someone who can step in as both sous chef and pastry chef in the next 5 minutes, we're completely screwed. The weight of failure was crushing. Marcus could already imagine the reviews. Lumiere falls apart during high-profile wedding. Seattle's most expensive restaurant delivers disaster. His career would be over. Elena's reputation would be destroyed. The restaurant would probably close within months. That's when they heard a quiet voice behind them, cutting through their panic like a knife through butter. Excuse me. Everyone turned. Standing just inside the restaurant's entrance, dripping wet from the Seattle rain, was a man who looked completely out of place in Lumiere's refined atmosphere. He appeared to be in his late 50s, with steel gray hair that hung past his collar in waves that suggested it hadn't seen a professional stylist in months. His beard was well-groomed but clearly self-maintained, and his weathered face spoke of someone who had spent considerable time outdoors. His clothes, a faded blue flannel shirt, worn jeans with patches on the knees, and leather boots that had walked many hard miles, clung to his lean but surprisingly strong-looking frame. But despite his disheveled appearance, there was something in his posture, something in the way he carried himself with quiet dignity, that didn't quite match the homeless aesthetic. His eyes, a startling blue-gray, held an intelligence and depth that seemed at odds with his circumstances. Amanda immediately stepped forward, her hostess training kicking in despite the chaos. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry, but we have a strict dress code, and we're fully booked tonight for a private event." "I'm not here to dine," the man interrupted gently, his voice carrying a slight accent that none of them could immediately place, perhaps French, maybe Belgian. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation through the window. You need help in the kitchen." The group exchanged glances that ranged from confused to incredulous. A homeless man offering to help in one of Seattle's most prestigious restaurants? It was absurd. "Help?" Marcus repeated slowly, his voice heavy with disbelief. "I heard you mention being short-staffed for an important event. I can cook. I'd be willing to help tonight, just in exchange for a meal." The silence that followed was broken by Jake's barely suppressed snort of laughter. "Cook? Dude, do you have any idea what kind of place this is? We're not McDonald's." Elena stepped forward, her exhaustion making her tone sharper than she usually allowed. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a fine dining establishment. We serve cuisine that requires years of professional training in." "I understand," the man said calmly, showing no offense at her words or tone. "But you're in trouble, and I have experience in professional kitchens." "What kind of experience?" Marcus found himself asking, though part of him couldn't believe he was entertaining this conversation. The man hesitated for just a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've worked in various establishments over the years. I understand timing, preparation, coordination. The fundamentals don't change, regardless of the setting." "Various establishments?" Tony asked skeptically. "Like what, Denny's? The local diner?" Again, that slight pause. "I've worked in fine dining before." Jake couldn't contain himself anymore. "Fine dining? Look, no offense, but you're asking us to trust our most important event of the year to someone who," he gestured vaguely at the man's appearance. "Someone who looks like he lives on the street," the man finished quietly. The brutal honesty of the statement hung in the air like a challenge. Elena studied his face more carefully. Despite her stress and desperation, her chef's instincts were still functioning. There was something about his calm confidence that didn't match his appearance. The way he stood, the way he spoke, even the way his eyes surveyed the dining room, it suggested someone who was familiar with this world. "What would you do about our pastry situation?" she asked, testing him. "We need individual plated desserts for 300 people, plus a 3-tier wedding cake." Without hesitation, the man replied, "For an event this size, I'd suggest a dessert station approach with individual presentations. Perhaps a deconstructed tiramisu with house-made ladyfingers, mascarpone mousse stabilized with gel-on gum, coffee soil made from crushed amaretti, and sugar work garnishes. Paired with seasonal fruit tarts featuring local berries, vanilla bean pastry cream, and chocolate tuile decorations shaped with acetate molds." The kitchen fell completely silent. Even the ambient noise of the dining room seemed to fade. Elena's eyebrows rose slowly. Those weren't the words of someone who learned cooking from chain restaurants. "And for kitchen coordination?" Marcus asked. despite himself. Station assignments based on individual skill levels and efficiency patterns. Temperature control zones for different preparation stages. Timing charts working backward from service time to ensure everything hits the pass simultaneously at proper temperature. Amanda stared openly. Jake's laughter had died completely. Tony looked like he'd seen a ghost. Elena leaned forward slightly. Where exactly did you learn to talk like that? The man's eyes briefly showed something, pain, perhaps, or loss, before returning to their calm steadiness. Experience teaches many things. Elena found herself studying the stranger's hands as he spoke. They were clean despite his appearance, with long fingers that moved with subtle precision when he gestured. These weren't the hands of someone who had never worked professionally. There were small scars, the kind every serious chef accumulated over years of knife work, and a particular callus on his right index finger that came from years of proper knife grip. You know what? Elena said suddenly, surprising everyone including herself. What do we have to lose? Elena, Marcus started, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious. We're already failing. Our reputation is about to be destroyed anyway. What's the worst that could happen? He makes it worse? Jake looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You want to let a homeless guy cook for the Morrison wedding? I want to let someone who just demonstrated more culinary knowledge than half our line cooks try to save our asses, Elena shot back. The stranger, they still hadn't asked his name, spoke quietly. I understand your hesitation. If you'll allow me to demonstrate, I can prepare something simple. You can judge whether my skills match my words. Demonstrate what? Tony asked skeptically. Give me access to your prep kitchen for 15 minutes. Let me make something that would typically be served as an amuse-bouche. If it's not restaurant quality, I'll leave immediately. Marcus looked around at his team. Elena was nodding slowly. Amanda seemed fascinated. Jake and Tony looked skeptical but desperate. In the background, he could see more guests checking their watches and speaking to servers with increasing irritation. 15 minutes, Marcus said finally. But if this goes badly... It won't, the man said with quiet confidence. Elena led him through the kitchen doors, and the others followed. The kitchen was a study in controlled chaos, stainless steel surfaces, professional-grade equipment, and staff members moving with increasing desperation as orders backed up. Sarah! Elena called to one of the line cooks. Clear station 3 for our consultant. The man surveyed the prep kitchen with eyes that took in everything, the layout, the equipment, the organization of ingredients. He moved to the walk-in cooler without asking permission, emerging with items that seemed random to the watching staff: duck breast, honey, aged balsamic vinegar, microgreens, and what looked like expensive aged cheese. What's he making? Jake whispered to Elena. I have no idea, but watch his knife work. The stranger had found a chef's knife, a good one, though not the custom blade a serious chef would typically use. He tested its balance, made a few practice motions, then began to work. What happened next made everyone in the kitchen stop what they were doing. His knife moved like a surgical instrument. Paper-thin slices of duck breast, each exactly the same thickness. Brunoise cuts of shallots so perfect they looked machine-made. Microgreens trimmed with precision that would make a perfectionistic chef weep with joy. Holy shit, Tony breathed, forgetting where he was. The man worked in complete silence, his movements economical and flowing. He seared the duck to perfect medium rare in less than 3 minutes, the timing so precise it was like watching a choreographed dance. While the meat rested, he created a gas streak with the honey and balsamic that filled the kitchen with an aroma so incredible that servers started drifting toward the prep station. Elena, whispered Sarah, the line cook, who the hell is this guy? Elena didn't answer. She was too busy watching the stranger plate 6 perfect amuse-bouches in under 2 minutes. Each plate was identical, the duck arranged in a perfect fan, microgreens placed with tweezers, the gastrique dotted around the plate in a pattern that was both artistic and purposeful, finished with tiny shavings of what Elena now recognized as aged Parmigiano Reggiano. The final touch was a single drop of reduced balsamic, placed with such precision it looked like a piece of modern art. "Taste," he said simply, stepping back from the plates. Elena picked up a fork and took a bite. Her eyes closed involuntarily. The flavors were perfectly balanced, the richness of the duck, the sweet tart complexity of the gastrique, the nutty bite of the cheese, all brought together with an expertise that spoke of decades of experience. "This is..." She started, then stopped. She looked up at the stranger with new eyes. "This is restaurant quality. This is better than restaurant quality." Marcus took a bite and his expression changed completely. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Again, that pause. "Here and there." Jake tried a piece and nearly dropped his fork. "Dude, this is incredible. This is better than anything I've ever made." "Because you're still learning," the man said gently, without condescension. "You have good instincts, but technique comes with time." Elena was staring at him intently now. "You didn't learn this in a chain restaurant. You didn't learn this in most restaurants. This is advanced technique. I've had good teachers." "Who? Where?" The man was already moving toward the main prep area. "If you'll allow me, I can begin working on solutions for tonight's service. Time is becoming critical." Elena looked at Marcus, who looked at the perfect amuse-bouches, then back at the stranger. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Auguste," the man replied simply. "Auguste what?" "Just Auguste." Elena made a decision that would change everything. "Auguste, you're hired. Temporarily. For tonight only. Can you handle the pastry station?" "Yes." "Can you coordinate with our line cooks to get service back on track?" "Yes." "Can you do it without destroying my kitchen or my reputation?" Auguste looked directly into her eyes, and for a moment, Elena saw something there that made her breath catch. Intelligence, yes, but also a deep sadness, and underneath it all, a confidence that seemed to come from years of experience in situations exactly like this. "I can do it," he said quietly. "Then do it." Auguste nodded once and began moving through the kitchen like he'd worked there for years. He studied the pending orders, assessed the capabilities of each cook, and within minutes had reorganized the entire flow of service. "Tony, you're moving the sauces. Your timing is good, but you're better at consistency than high-pressure plating. Jake, take over the appetizer station, but follow the timing I'm about to show you. Sarah, you'll assist me with pastry prep." The kitchen staff looked to Elena, who nodded. "Do what he says." What happened over the next hour was nothing short of miraculous. Auguste moved through the kitchen like a conductor leading a symphony orchestra, and somehow, miraculously, the chaos began to transform into harmony. "Jake, your scallops are 30 seconds away from perfect. Start plating now," Auguste called while simultaneously whisking a sabayon that would have challenged a pastry chef with 20 years of experience. "Tony, sauce for table 7 needs more acid, 2 drops of lemon, no more." The transformation was visible. Orders that had been backing up for over an hour suddenly began flowing out of the kitchen. But more than that, the quality was exceptional. Each plate that left the pass looked like it belonged in a magazine. Marcus stood at the kitchen door, watching in amazement as Auguste seemed to be everywhere at once, checking seasoning, adjusting plating, teaching technique, all while working on what appeared to be a completely improvised dessert menu. "Behind you, chef," Auguste called, moving past Elena with a tray of what looked like miniature works of art. "Did he just call you chef?" Amanda whispered to Marcus. "I think he just fixed our entire service," Marcus replied, still not quite believing what he was seeing. In the dining room, the mood was shifting dramatically. Servers who had been making excuses 20 minutes ago were now delivering courses that had guests photographing their plates. The complaints had stopped. In fact, Marcus could hear actual conversation and laughter returning to the dining room. At the head table, Richard Morrison had put away his phone and was actually smiling as he tasted what Auguste had plated as the fish course, halibut with a sauce that nobody on staff had ever seen before, garnished with vegetables cut so precisely they looked like geometric art. "Marcus," Elena called from the kitchen, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "You need to see this." She led him to the pastry station, where Auguste was putting finishing touches on what could only be described as edible sculptures. Individual desserts that looked like they belonged in a museum, each one unique but clearly part of a cohesive vision. "He's been working for 90 minutes, Elena said quietly. "And he's created an entire dessert menu from scratch. Look at this." She pointed to a dessert that looked like a deconstructed forest, chocolate soil, white chocolate birch trees, fruit moss, and what appeared to be edible flowers arranged to look like a miniature woodland scene. "Where did the edible flowers come from?" Marcus asked. "We don't stock edible flowers." "He sent Amanda to the florist next door," Elena replied. "Apparently he knows which decorative flowers are safe to eat and which ones aren't. He's been creating these garnishes that transform our existing ingredients into something completely different." Auguste looked up from his work, his hands moving in small, precise motions as he placed the final elements on a dessert plate. "The wedding cake will be ready in 40 minutes. I've redesigned it to be more stable for the 3-tier structure you need, and the flavor profile will complement the dessert station." "You redesigned our wedding cake?" Marcus asked, not sure whether to be amazed or terrified. The original design would have been difficult to execute without proper preparation time. "This version will be more elegant and easier to serve." Elena walked over to look at Auguste's cake sketch, drawn quickly on a piece of parchment paper. Her eyes widened. This is beautiful. And you can actually make this tonight?" "It's already in progress. The structural elements are baking now." Jake appeared at Elena's elbow, carrying an empty plate. "Chef, table 12 wants to know if they can order a second appetizer course. They said it was the best thing they've ever tasted." Elena looked at Auguste. "What did you serve table 12? "Duck liver mousse with brioche and a cherry gastrique. I noticed you had duck liver in your walk-in that was approaching its use-by date." "You made duck liver mousse in 20 minutes? 18 minutes, actually. The technique isn't complicated if you understand the fat content ratios." Marcus was beginning to feel like he was in some kind of alternate reality. "Auguste, where exactly did you learn to cook like this?" For the first time since he'd arrived, Auguste hesitated in his work. His hands stilled for just a moment, and something flickered across his face: pain, memory, loss. "I've worked in kitchens for most of my life," he said finally, resuming his precise movements. "What kind of kitchens?" Elena pressed gently. "Various types." It was clear he didn't want to elaborate, but Elena's curiosity was overwhelming her sense of politeness. She had worked with some of the best chefs in the world, and Auguste's technique was at that level, possibly beyond it. "Auguste," she said carefully, "I need to ask directly. Have you worked in Michelin-starred restaurants?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Auguste's hands never stopped moving, but the silence stretched just long enough to be meaningful. "I have experience with fine dining," he said finally. Before Elena could ask more questions, Amanda burst through the kitchen doors, her face flushed with excitement. "Marcus! Mr. Morrison wants to speak with you. And the food critic from Seattle Magazine is asking about our pastry chef." She says she's never seen dessert presentation like this outside of New York or Paris. Marcus felt his heart skip. Food critics could make or break a restaurant with a single review. If Seattle Magazine was impressed, what should I tell them? Amanda asked. Marcus looked at Auguste, who was now putting finishing touches on individual chocolate sculptures that looked like they belonged in an art gallery. Tell them our pastry chef prefers to let his work speak for itself, Marcus said finally. Also, Amanda continued, slightly breathless, 3 other tables have asked if they can book private dinners here next month. And someone from the tech conference next week wants to know if we cater corporate events. Elena grabbed Marcus's arm. Do you understand what's happening? We went from complete disaster to the best service this restaurant has ever had. In 2 hours. Marcus was trying to process the magnitude of the turnaround when a server approached with a concerned expression. Marcus, there's a gentleman at table 9 who says he recognizes our pastry chef. He's asking a lot of questions. What kind of questions? Elena asked. Professional questions. About technique. He says he used to work in restaurants in France and he's never seen anyone work like that. Auguste's head came up sharply. For the first time since arriving, he looked genuinely concerned. What did you tell him? Auguste asked the server. Nothing. I said I'd ask management. Auguste was already untying his apron. Perhaps I should. No, Elena said firmly. You're not going anywhere. We still have 2 hours of service left, and I don't care if that guy used to cook for the Queen of England. You're the reason we're succeeding tonight. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Lumiere earlier than usual, his mind still spinning from the previous night's events. The Morrison wedding had ended with standing ovations, literally. Guests had applauded the dessert course, something Marcus had never seen in 15 years of restaurant management. But Auguste had disappeared. After the last plate was served and the kitchen was cleaned, Marcus had turned to thank their mysterious savior, only to find that he had slipped away as quietly as he had arrived. The only trace of his presence was a perfectly organized pastry station and a small note written on parchment paper, "Thank you for the opportunity." Ah. Elena was already in the kitchen when Marcus arrived, staring at that note like it might reveal its secrets. Have you figured it out yet? Marcus asked. Figured what out? Who he really is. Because that wasn't just some talented homeless guy, Elena. Nobody works like that without serious training. Elena looked up from the note, her expression troubled. I've been thinking about it all night. His knife work, his technique, the way he organized the entire kitchen. Marcus, I've worked with James Beard winners who couldn't do what he did last night. And the way he talked about food, Marcus added. The terminology he used, the techniques he mentioned, that was culinary school vocabulary. Advanced culinary school. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jake and Tony, both looking tired but energized from the previous night's success. Is Auguste coming in today? Jake asked immediately. Because I want to learn that sauce technique he showed me. We don't know, Elena admitted. He left without saying where he was staying or how to contact him. He's probably sleeping under some bridge, Tony said, then immediately looked guilty. Sorry, that came out wrong. But seriously, where does a guy like that go after working in a place like this? The question haunted all of them. Marcus had spent half the night wondering the same thing. I keep thinking about his hands, Elena said quietly. Did any of you notice his hands? They had scars, but they were old scars. Professional scars. And that callus on his knife finger, that comes from decades of serious cooking. Plus he knew our equipment better than some of our own staff, Jake added. He knew exactly where everything was after just looking around for 5 minutes. Their speculation was interrupted by the arrival of Amanda, who burst through the front door with a stack of newspapers under her arm. "You guys need to see this," she said breathlessly. "We're in 3 different publications this morning." She spread the newspapers across the hostess stand. The headlines made Marcus's heart race. Lumiere delivers stunning Morrison wedding. Seattle restaurant raises the bar with exceptional service. Mystery chef creates culinary magic at high-profile event. Mystery chef? Elena read over Marcus's shoulder. Amanda pointed to the article in Seattle Magazine. "Look at this quote from their food critic. The dessert course featured technique and artistry that rivals anything I've experienced in Michelin-starred establishments." The anonymous pastry chef working at Lumiere last night demonstrated a level of skill that suggests world-class training. "World-class training," Marcus repeated slowly. "It gets better," Amanda continued, flipping to another article. The critic from Food and Wine was there as a guest. She wrote a blog post this morning calling it one of the most memorable dining experiences on the West Coast. Elena was reading over their shoulders, her excitement building. Listen to this description. Each course demonstrated not just technical proficiency, but an artistic vision that transformed familiar ingredients into extraordinary experiences. The coordination of flavors and presentation suggested the work of a master craftsman. "Master craftsman," Tony repeated. "Guys, who the hell was that man?" Before anyone could answer, the phone rang. Marcus answered it automatically. "Lumiere, this is Marcus." "Mr. Chen?" "This is Victoria Hartley from Pacific Northwest Magazine. I'm calling about the extraordinary meal we experienced at your restaurant last night." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Pacific Northwest Magazine was the region's most influential food publication. "Thank you, Ms. Hartley. We're pleased you enjoyed your evening. Mr. Chen, I need to ask directly about your pastry chef. Several of my colleagues and I were discussing the dessert course, and were convinced we witnessed the work of someone with truly exceptional credentials. Would it be possible to interview the chef?" Marcus looked at Elena, who was listening and shaking her head frantically. "I'm afraid our pastry chef prefers to maintain privacy," Marcus said carefully. "Mr. Chen, I've been writing about food for 20 years. I've dined at Le Bernardin, the French Laundry, 11 Madison Park. What I experienced last night was at that level." "Who trained your chef?" I'm not at liberty to discuss our staff's backgrounds." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Chen, there are rumors circulating among food professionals this morning. Some very interesting rumors." Marcus felt a chill. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that suggest your mystery chef might be someone quite famous who's been out of the public eye for some time." After Marcus hung up, the kitchen fell silent. "Famous?" Jake asked finally. Elena was staring at the note Auguste had left, her mind racing through possibilities. "Marcus, we need to find him." "How?" "We don't even know his last name. We know he's probably in the area. He can't have gone far without transportation." "And then what?" Tony asked. "What if he doesn't want to be found? What if he left for a reason?" Elena folded the note carefully. "Then we respect that. But I need to know who he is. I need to understand how someone with that level of skill ends up." "Homeless," Marcus finished quietly. The word hung in the air like a question mark. "You know what bothers me most?" Elena said finally. "The way he looked when that customer started asking questions about France. He was genuinely worried. Like he was afraid of being recognized." "Maybe he was fired from somewhere important," Jake suggested. "Maybe there was a scandal. Or maybe," Elena said slowly, "he used to be somebody, and something happened that changed everything." As if summoned by their conversation, the front door opened. But instead of Auguste, it was a well-dressed man in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive coat. "Excuse me," he said, approaching the hostess stand. "I dined here last night, and I need to speak with your pastry chef immediately." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. "I'm sorry, sir, but—" "My name is Henri Dubois," the man interrupted, his French accent unmistakable. "I am chef-owner of Le Jardin in Vancouver. Last night, I witnessed technique that I have seen only once before in my 40 years as a professional chef." Elena felt her breath catch. "Sir?" "The man working your pastry station last night," Henri continued, his voice intense. "Where did you find him?" He came in looking for work," Marcus said carefully. Henry's eyes widened. "My God. It is him. I knew at the moment I saw his sugar work. There is only one chef in the world who creates structural elements like that." "Who?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Henri looked directly at her, his expression grave. "If I am correct, your mystery chef is Auguste Laurent. And if that is true, you have been working with one of the greatest culinary talents who ever lived." The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Elena felt like the world had shifted on its axis. "Auguste Laurent," she whispered. "That's impossible." Henri Dubois studied her face carefully. "You know the name?" "Every serious chef knows that name," Elena replied, her voice barely audible. "Auguste Laurent is one of the most celebrated chefs in the world. 3 Michelin stars. Restaurant of the Year. He was called the Mozart of modern cuisine." Henri corrected grimly. "Until 15 years ago, when he disappeared." Marcus felt dizzy. "Disappeared how?" Henri removed his coat and sat down heavily at the nearest table, as if the weight of his revelation was too much to bear standing. Auguste Laurent owned Le Coeur and Lion, 3 Michelin stars for 12 consecutive years. He was at the peak of his career, revolutionizing French cuisine, mentoring the next generation of great chefs. And then, in 2009, tragedy struck. Elena sank into a chair across from him. "What happened?" "A car accident. Auguste was driving home from the restaurant late one night with his wife and daughter. Another driver, drunk, ran a red light." Henry's voice grew heavy. "His wife Marie and his 8-year-old daughter Sophie were killed instantly. Auguste survived, but barely." The kitchen staff had gathered around, listening in stunned silence. After the accident, Henri continued, Auguste never recovered. He blamed himself, though it wasn't his fault. He began drinking heavily. His cooking suffered. The restaurant lost its stars one by one. Eventually, he lost everything: the restaurant, his reputation, his sobriety. "When did you last see him?" Marcus asked quietly. 2011. He had been living rough for months. I tried to help him, offered him work, but he was broken. He said he could never cook professionally again, that food had lost all meaning for him. Henri looked around the restaurant. "I heard rumors over the years, sightings in different cities, always moving, always alone. But last night, watching your pastry chef work, there was no mistaking that artistry." Elena was staring at Auguste's note, understanding now why his handwriting had seemed so elegant, so practiced. "The sugar work," she said suddenly. "You mentioned his sugar work specifically. Auguste Laurent pioneered techniques that are still taught in culinary schools today. That structural approach to dessert architecture, the way he manipulates temperature and texture, it's unmistakable. Like a fingerprint." Jake spoke up hesitantly. "So the homeless guy who saved our asses last night was actually one of the most famous chefs in the world?" "One of the greatest chefs who ever lived," Henri corrected. "Auguste Laurent influenced an entire generation of culinary artists. Before his tragedy, he was mentioned alongside Escoffier and Bocuse. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. And he's been living on the streets for 15 years? Probably longer, Henri said sadly. Addiction and grief can destroy anyone, regardless of their talents or achievements. Marcus was trying to process the magnitude of what he was learning. Why didn't he tell us who he was? Would you have believed him? Henri asked. A homeless man claiming to be Auguste Laurent? You would have thought he was delusional. Plus, Elena added, understanding beginning to dawn, he probably doesn't want to be Auguste Laurent anymore. That identity is connected to everything he lost. Henri nodded gravely. The Auguste Laurent who created Le Coeur died with his family. The man you met last night is someone else, someone who has learned to survive by hiding from his own past. Amanda, who had been silent through this entire revelation, finally spoke. We have to find him. Why? Tony asked. If he wanted us to know who he was, he would have told us. Because, Elena said, standing up with sudden determination, a man with that much talent shouldn't be living on the streets. Because he saved our restaurant last night, and we owe him the chance to save himself. Henri looked skeptical. I tried to help him years ago. He wasn't ready then. Maybe he's ready now, Marcus suggested. Maybe last night changed something for him too. Where would we even look? Jake asked. Elena was already moving toward the kitchen. He knows this neighborhood. He appeared here during our crisis, which means he was probably nearby. He has to be staying somewhere in the area. Elena, Henri called after her, if you find him, be very careful how you approach this. Auguste is fragile. The last thing you want to do is push him away by confronting him about his identity. Then how do we help him? Henri considered this carefully. Offer him what he needs most, a chance to cook again, without judgment, without pressure to be who he used to be. Let him choose to trust you with his story. Marcus was already reaching for his coat. I'm going to look for him. We all are, Elena declared. Jake, Tony, can you handle prep for lunch service? Are you kidding? Jake replied. After what that man taught me last night, I'd follow him anywhere. Find him, bring him back, and let me learn from a master. As the team prepared to search for Auguste, Henri stood to leave. If you find him, he said at the door, tell him Henri Dubois sends his regards. Tell him that Lou Jardin will always have a place for him, no questions asked. And tell him. Henri paused, his voice thick with emotion. Tell him that Marie and Sophie would be proud of the man he helped last night. After Henri left, the team stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their mission settling on them. Where do we start? Amanda asked. Elena looked around at her staff, people who had become like family over the years of working together, people who had witnessed something extraordinary the night before. We start with the assumption that Auguste Laurent chose to help us for a reason, she said. Maybe after 15 years of running from his past, he's ready to build something new. And if he's not? Marcus asked. Elena picked up Auguste's note one more time, studying the elegant handwriting that now made perfect sense. Then we respect his choice. But first, we give him the opportunity to make that choice. As they prepared to search the streets of Seattle for one of the world's greatest chefs, none of them could have imagined that Auguste was sitting just 3 blocks away, in a small diner, staring at a cup of coffee and trying to understand why, for the first time in 15 years, he had felt truly alive while cooking. Auguste sat in the corner booth of Mel's Diner, a 24-hour establishment that had seen better decades. The vinyl seat was cracked, the coffee was bitter, and the fluorescent lighting gave everything a sickly yellow tint. It was exactly the kind of place where someone could disappear, which had been Auguste's intention for the past 15 years. But tonight, this morning, really, as dawn was breaking over Seattle, he couldn't disappear into the background. His hands still trembled slightly, not from withdrawal or cold, but from the muscle memory of what he had done the night before. He had cooked. Really cooked. For the first time since Marie and Sophie died, he had felt the familiar rhythm of a professional kitchen, the dance of timing and technique that had once been as natural to him as breathing. And for those few hours, the crushing weight of grief had lifted just enough for him to remember who he used to be. "More coffee, Han?" asked Dolores, the night shift waitress who had served Auguste many times over the past few months without ever asking questions about why a homeless man always paid for his coffee with exact change and never ordered food. "Please," Auguste replied, pushing his cup toward her. Dolores poured the coffee and studied his face. "You look different tonight." "Less? I don't know. Less haunted, maybe?" Auguste almost smiled. If only she knew. "I had a good evening." "Work?" "Something like that." Dolores had worked at Mel's for 23 years and had developed an instinct for reading people. The man in the corner booth had always intrigued her, too well-spoken to be a typical vagrant, too educated in his manner, too careful with his appearance despite his circumstances. "You know," she said, sliding into the seat across from him without invitation, "I've been watching you for months. You're not like the others who come in here." Auguste tensed. "I'm just passing through." "For 4 months? That's a long pass-through." She was right, of course. Auguste had been in Seattle longer than he'd stayed anywhere since his world collapsed. Something about the city's gray skies and constant rain matched his internal weather. "Dolores," called a voice from the kitchen, "order up." She stood to retrieve the order, but paused. "Whatever happened to you, it wasn't your fault. I can tell the difference between someone who did something wrong and someone who had something wrong done to them." After she left, Auguste stared into his coffee cup and saw his reflection wavering in the dark liquid. For 15 years, he had worked hard to become invisible, to shed every trace of the man he had once been. He had changed his appearance, simplified his name from Auguste Laurent to just Auguste, and moved constantly to avoid recognition. But last night, for those few hours in Lumiere's kitchen, he had felt like Auguste Laurent again. And it had been both wonderful and terrifying. His reverie was interrupted by the sound of the diner's bell jingling as the door opened. Auguste looked up automatically and felt his blood freeze. Elena Rodriguez stood in the doorway, scanning the restaurant methodically. She was still wearing her chef's jacket from the night before, now wrinkled and stained, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept. Auguste slid lower in his booth, but it was too late. Elena's eyes found his, and her face lit up with relief. "Auguste," she called, walking toward his table. "Thank God we found you." "We?" Auguste asked, though he already knew the answer as Marcus, Jake, and Tony filed into the diner behind Elena. "We've been looking for you for 3 hours, Elena said, sliding into the booth across from him. "We need to talk." Auguste felt the familiar urge to run, the instinct that had kept him safe and anonymous for so long. "There's nothing to discuss. I helped with your service, and now I'm moving on." "Moving on where?" Marcus asked, taking a seat at the adjacent table. "Auguste, we know you don't have anywhere to go. You don't know anything about me." Elena leaned forward, her voice gentle but insistent. "We know more than you think." Auguste's eyes darted toward the door, calculating escape routes. "What do you want?" "We want to offer you a job," Elena said simply. "A real job. Full-time position as our pastry chef." "That's impossible." "Why? Because you think you're not qualified?" Jake interjected. "Dude, what you did last night was the most incredible cooking I've ever seen." Auguste shook his head. "You don't understand. I can't." "Can't what?" Elena pressed. "Can't cook? Because we saw you cook, and it was extraordinary. I can't stay in one place. I can't commit to anything. I can't be responsible for—" Auguste stopped himself before saying too much. Elena studied his face, seeing the pain he was trying to hide. "Auguste, a friend of ours came by the restaurant this morning. Someone who recognized your work." Auguste went completely still. "Who?" "Henri Dubois. From Le Jardin in Vancouver." The color drained from Auguste's face. Henri had been a colleague, almost a friend, back when Auguste Laurent had friends and colleagues and a life that made sense. "What did he tell you?" Auguste asked quietly. Elena chose her words carefully, remembering Henri's warning about being gentle. "He told us that you're someone who has been through tremendous loss. Someone who used to cook at a very high level." "Used to," Auguste repeated bitterly. "That's the operative phrase." "But you still can," Marcus said. "What you did last night proved that." Auguste was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands, the hands that had once created dishes served to presidents and celebrities, the hands that had held his dying daughter. "You don't understand what you're asking," he said finally. "I'm not the person I used to be. I can't be trusted with responsibility." "Why?" Elena asked gently. Auguste looked up at her, and for a moment, she saw through the careful walls he had built around himself. She saw grief so profound it was like looking into an abyss. "Because everything I've ever cared about has been destroyed," he said quietly. "And I can't bear to care about anything again." The diner fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic on the street outside. Elena reached across the table and placed her hand gently over Auguste's. "What if you didn't have to care about anything except the cooking? What if we asked nothing from you except to do what you did last night?" "It doesn't work that way. Cooking is caring. You can't separate them." "Then maybe it's time to try caring again." Auguste pulled his hand away and stood up abruptly. "You don't know what you're asking." "We're asking you to give yourself a second chance," Marcus said. "I don't deserve a second chance." Elena stood as well, her voice firm but kind. "That's not your decision to make. Henri Dubois told us something else. He said that Marie and Sophie would be proud of the man who helped us last night." Auguste's carefully maintained composure cracked. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked every one of his 58 years. "Don't," he whispered. "Please don't use their names." "Why?" "Because it hurts too much to remember that they loved you? Because you think honoring their memory means punishing yourself forever?" Tears were forming in Auguste's eyes, the first tears he had allowed himself in years. "I killed them," he said, his voice breaking. "I was driving. I made the decision to take that route. If I had chosen differently, if the other driver hadn't been drunk, they would still be alive," Elena interrupted. "You didn't kill anyone, Auguste. You survived something that would have destroyed most people." "It did destroy me." "No," she said firmly. "Because the man who cooked in our kitchen last night wasn't destroyed. He was wounded, yes. But he was still capable of creating beauty, still capable of bringing joy to others." Auguste was crying now, silent tears that spoke of 15 years of suppressed grief. "I don't know how to be anything other than broken," he admitted. Elena stepped closer. "Then stay broken. But stay broken here, with us, where your broken pieces can still create something beautiful." Dolores had been watching the conversation from behind the counter, her waitress instincts telling her that something important was happening at table 7. When she saw the tears on Auguste's face, she quietly approached with a box of tissues and a fresh pot of coffee, setting them down without a word before retreating to give them privacy. Auguste accepted the tissues gratefully, wiping his eyes and trying to regain his composure. The diner felt too small suddenly, too exposed. He had spent years perfecting the art of emotional invisibility, and now he was falling apart in front of people who had known him for less than 24 hours. "I can't promise anything," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to commit to a future. I don't even know how to plan for tomorrow." "Then don't," Elena said, sitting back down across from him. "Just commit to today. Come to work today. Cook today. Leave tomorrow as a question mark." Marcus nodded in agreement. "We're not asking you to sign a contract or make a 5-year plan. We're asking you to show up for one shift. And if I can't handle it, then you leave," Jake said simply. No questions asked. "But Auguste, what you taught me in one night about knife technique and timing, I need to learn more. Please." Auguste looked around the table at these people who were offering him something he had convinced himself he didn't deserve, a chance to be useful again. "The media attention," he said suddenly. "Those reviews this morning will bring more scrutiny. Food critics, other chefs. Eventually, someone will recognize me." "Is that what you're afraid of?" Elena asked. "Being recognized as Auguste Laurent?" The name hung in the air between them like a bridge Auguste wasn't sure he was ready to cross. "I'm afraid of becoming him again," Auguste admitted. Auguste Laurent had everything and lost it all. Auguste Laurent failed everyone who depended on him. "What if Auguste Laurent isn't who you are anymore?" Marcus suggested. "What if you're just Auguste, our pastry chef, who happens to have exceptional skills?" "Skills that come with a story," Auguste said. "And stories have a way of defining people." Elena leaned forward. "Then let's write a new story. Not about the famous chef who fell from grace, but about the man who found purpose again in helping others." Auguste was quiet for several minutes, staring out the diner's window at the early morning traffic. Seattle was waking up, people heading to work, starting their day with purpose and direction. For 15 years, he had watched the world move forward while he remained stuck in a single moment of tragedy. "There are conditions," he said finally. "Name them," Elena replied immediately. "I work under the name Auguste only. No last name, no biography, no interviews with food magazines." "Agreed. If anyone from my past shows up, other chefs, food critics, anyone who knew Auguste Laurent, I leave immediately." "What if we could handle those situations without you having to leave?" Marcus asked. "How?" "By protecting your privacy. By making it clear that our staff's personal histories are not public information." Auguste considered this. "You would do that?" "We would do that," Elena confirmed. "And if my condition affects my work? If I have bad days, if the grief becomes overwhelming? Then we support you through it," Elena said without hesitation. "Mental health is health, Auguste. We don't abandon people because they're struggling." Jake cleared his throat. "Can I ask something? The way you organized our kitchen last night, the way you coordinated everyone, have you managed kitchens before?" Auguste nodded slowly. "I've had experience with kitchen management. Would you be willing to share that knowledge? Not just the cooking techniques, but the leadership skills?" For the first time since entering the diner, Auguste almost smiled. "You want me to teach you how to run a kitchen?" "I want to learn from someone who obviously knows what they're doing," Jake replied earnestly. Auguste looked around the table again. These people were offering him more than just a job. They were offering him a chance to matter again, to use skills he had thought were buried forever. "There's something else," he said quietly. "I have no permanent address, no bank account, no documentation of employment for the past 15 years. Hiring me will be complicated." "We'll figure it out," Marcus said. "Amanda is excellent with paperwork. We'll find a way to make it work legally." "And housing?" "There's a small apartment above the restaurant," Elena said. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and private." Previous chef used it when he was working late shifts. Auguste felt something he hadn't experienced in years: possibility. Not hope, exactly. Hope felt too dangerous, but the faint suggestion that maybe, just maybe, he could build something small and sustainable. One day at a time, he said, more to himself than to them. One day at a time, Elena agreed. Auguste finished his coffee and stood up slowly. His body ached, from sleeping rough, from the intense work of the previous night, from the emotional weight of this conversation. If we're going to do this, he said, I need to be clear about something. I'm not Auguste Laurent anymore. I can't be. That man died with his family. I'm just Auguste, and I don't know who that is yet. Then we'll figure it out together, Elena said, standing as well. As they prepared to leave the diner, Dolores approached with Auguste's check. He reached for his wallet, but Marcus had already placed money on the table. Auguste is part of our team now, Marcus told Dolores. His coffee is on us. Dolores smiled. Good. He's been carrying something heavy for a long time. Maybe it's time to set it down. Walking back toward Lumiere in the early morning light, Auguste felt the unfamiliar sensation of walking toward something rather than away from it. For 15 years, he had been running from his past, from his grief, from the possibility of caring about anything again. Now, for the first time since the night that changed everything, he was walking toward a future that might include something other than mere survival. Auguste, Elena said as they reached the restaurant, welcome to Lumiere. Auguste looked up at the elegant signage, the windows that would soon be filled with light and laughter and the sounds of people sharing meals together. Thank you, he said quietly. And for the first time in 15 years, he meant it. 3 weeks later, Lumiere had become a different restaurant entirely. The transformation wasn't just in the kitchen, though Auguste's influence there was undeniable. Under his quiet guidance, the entire staff had elevated their skills. Jake's knife work had improved dramatically, Tony had developed an intuitive understanding of sauce consistency, and even the servers had begun to understand the artistry behind each plate they carried. But it was more than technical improvement. There was a sense of purpose in the restaurant now, a feeling that they were creating something meaningful rather than just serving expensive food to wealthy customers. Auguste had settled into a routine that surprised everyone, including himself. He arrived early each morning, before the rest of the staff, and spent an hour in meditation-like preparation, organizing his station, reviewing the day's menu, and centering himself for the work ahead. His movements were economical and precise, and he spoke only when necessary, but his presence had brought a calm efficiency to what had once been a chaotic environment. The apartment above the restaurant suited him perfectly. It was small, sparse, and required nothing from him except basic maintenance. He had furnished it with only the essentials: a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, and a bookshelf that remained empty except for a single photograph, Marie and Sophie, taken during happier times when Auguste Laurent had been a man who believed in permanence. Elena had learned to read Auguste's moods and energy levels, understanding that some days he was more present than others. On his difficult days, when the weight of memory seemed particularly heavy, she simply made sure he had space to work without conversation. On his better days, she asked questions about technique or flavor combinations, and Auguste would sometimes spend an hour explaining the science behind emulsification or the cultural history of classical French preparations. But it was Marcus who noticed the signs first. "Elena," he said on a Tuesday morning, pulling her aside before service, "we might have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The reservation book. Look at this." Elena examined the computer screen Marcus was showing her. Every table for the next 6 weeks was booked, with a waiting list that stretched into the following month. "That's not a problem," Elena said. "That's success. Look at the notes section. Look at what people are requesting." Elena scrolled through the reservation details and felt her stomach tighten. Comment after comment requested the pastry chef's tasting menu or mentioned hearing about the incredible dessert experience or asked specifically to watch the kitchen team work. Food bloggers have been posting about us, Marcus continued. Social media influencers. And yesterday, someone from Seattle Met called asking about a feature story on our mystery pastry chef. Elena closed the laptop, her mind racing. Auguste had been very clear about his conditions. No publicity, no interviews, no attention. But the quality of his work was making anonymity increasingly difficult. Have you told Auguste about this? Not yet. But Elena, it's getting worse. Yesterday, a woman came in claiming to be a food photographer from New York. She wanted to document our kitchen procedures. What did you tell her? That we don't allow photography during service. But she offered to pay premium for access. When I refused, she mentioned that she'd heard rumors about our pastry chef having an interesting background. Elena felt a chill. Rumors? Someone is asking questions. Someone with connections in the culinary world. They were interrupted by the arrival of Auguste, who entered through the back door carrying a small bag of ingredients he had sourced from Pike Place Market. He moved through the kitchen with his usual quiet efficiency, nodding to Elena and Marcus before beginning his morning preparation. Elena watched him work, noting the careful way he arranged his tools, the methodical approach to ingredient preparation that spoke of decades of professional experience. In 3 weeks, Auguste had become essential to Lumiere's operation, not just as a chef but as an anchor of stability and excellence. The thought of losing him was unbearable. We need to be proactive, Elena whispered to Marcus. We need to control this situation before it controls us. How? By being honest with Auguste about what's happening and letting him decide how to handle it. Marcus looked skeptical. What if he decides to leave? Then we respect his choice. But he deserves to know what we're facing. Auguste looked up from his prep work, his intuitive awareness picking up on their whispered conversation. Is there something I should know? Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. There was no point in hiding the situation. Auguste, Elena said, approaching his station, we need to discuss something. The restaurant has been getting a lot of attention lately. What kind of attention? Media attention. Food bloggers, critics, photographers. People are talking about our pastry program. Auguste's hand stilled on the knife he was holding. What are they saying? Marcus cleared his throat. They're saying it's exceptional. World class. Some are asking questions about who's responsible for the elevated quality. I see. Auguste set down his knife and faced them directly. And you're concerned that someone will identify me? We're concerned about your privacy, Elena said carefully. And your comfort level with the situation. Auguste was quiet for several minutes, his expression unreadable. Elena had learned to recognize this as his processing mode, the moments when he was weighing options and outcomes with the careful consideration of someone who had learned that decisions have consequences. Has anyone mentioned the name Auguste Laurent? He asked finally. Not specifically, Marcus replied. But there are rumors about a mystery chef with exceptional credentials. Auguste nodded slowly. It was inevitable, I suppose. Excellence is difficult to hide, especially in the food world. What do you want to do? Elena asked. I want to continue working. But I think we need to be prepared for the possibility that my identity will be discovered. And if it is? Auguste looked around the kitchen that had become his sanctuary, at the team that had become something like family, at the work that had given him purpose again. Then we deal with it honestly, he said. I'm tired of running, Elena. For the first time in 15 years, I have something worth staying for. Elena felt a wave of relief, but also apprehension. Are you sure? Because once that door opens, there's no closing it again. I'm sure. but I want to control how the story is told. If my identity becomes public knowledge, I want it to be on our terms." Marcus was typing on his phone. "We could reach out to Henri Dubois. He has connections in food media. Maybe he could help us manage the narrative." "That's a good idea," Auguste agreed. "Henri understands the situation. He could provide context without sensationalizing the story." As they discussed strategy, none of them noticed the young woman sitting at the corner table in the dining room, partially hidden behind a large menu but clearly listening to every word coming from the kitchen. She had been there for 20 minutes, nursing a single cup of coffee and taking notes in a small notebook. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was a freelance food journalist from Los Angeles, and she had been researching rumors about Auguste Laurent for the past week. And she had just heard enough to confirm her suspicions. Sarah Chen waited until the kitchen conversation died down before quietly gathering her things and slipping out of Lumiere. Her hands were shaking slightly as she walked to her rental car, not from nerves, but from excitement. She had stumbled onto the story of the decade, and she knew it. Auguste Laurent, the legendary French chef who had disappeared 15 years ago, was working as a pastry chef in a Seattle restaurant under an assumed identity. The culinary world had been speculating about his fate for years. Some believed he had died, others thought he had retreated to a monastery in France. No one had imagined he was living homeless in American cities. Sarah sat in her car and reviewed her notes. She had enough confirmation to write the story, but she wanted more. She wanted the exclusive interview, the photographs, the complete narrative of how one of the world's greatest chefs had fallen so far and apparently found his way back. Back inside Lumiere, Auguste was experiencing an unfamiliar sensation, peace mixed with anticipation. For the first time since Marie and Sophie's death, he wasn't dreading the future. The prospect of his identity being revealed no longer filled him with panic. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding from Auguste Laurent and start integrating that part of himself back into who he was becoming. "Auguste," Elena said, interrupting his thoughts, "I want to ask you something, and please feel free to say no." "What is it?" "Would you be willing to expand your role here? Not just pastry, but perhaps help me redesign our entire menu? Create something that reflects both of our styles?" Auguste considered this carefully. For 3 weeks, he had worked within Elena's established framework, contributing his skills while respecting her authority as head chef. The idea of true collaboration was both appealing and terrifying. "You would trust me with that level of responsibility?" "Auguste, in 3 weeks you've transformed our kitchen culture, elevated our entire team's skills, and created desserts that have food critics calling us one of the best restaurants on the West Coast. Yes, I trust you with that responsibility." "I would want equal creative input," Auguste said. "If we're going to collaborate, it needs to be a true partnership." Elena smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." As they began discussing menu concepts, Jake burst through the kitchen doors with an expression of concern. "Elena, we have a situation. There's a woman outside who says she's a food journalist. She's asking specifically about Auguste." Auguste felt his stomach drop. "What kind of questions?" "She wants to know if it's true that Auguste Laurent is working here. She says she has sources confirming your identity." The kitchen fell silent. Elena looked at Auguste, waiting for his response. "What's her name?" Auguste asked. "Sarah Chen, from Los Angeles. She says she's writing a piece about missing culinary legends." Auguste closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself. When he opened them, his expression was calm but resolved. "Bring her in," he said. "Auguste, are you sure?" Elena asked. "I'm sure. If this conversation is going to happen, it should happen on our terms, in our space." Jake hesitated. "She has a photographer with her." "No photographs," Auguste said firmly. "Not yet. but I'll speak with her. 5 minutes later, Sarah entered Lemaire's kitchen with the eager energy of a journalist who knew she was onto something big. She was younger than Auguste had expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a confident manner. "Mr. Laurent," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "It's just Auguste," he corrected, shaking her hand. "And I haven't agreed to anything yet. I'm willing to listen to what you want to know." Sarah pulled out a digital recorder. "May I?" Auguste looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "You may record, but I reserve the right to end this conversation at any time." "Of course." "Mr. Auguste, the culinary world has been wondering about your whereabouts for 15 years. Can you tell me what happened after Le Coeur closed?" Auguste was quiet for a long moment. He had rehearsed versions of this conversation in his mind countless times over the years, but now that it was happening, he found himself uncertain where to begin. "What happened was that I lost everything that mattered to me," he said finally. "My family, my purpose, my identity. For a long time, I didn't want to be found." "But you continued cooking?" "Surviving," Auguste corrected. "I did whatever work I could find to survive. Sometimes that involved cooking, but it wasn't cooking in any meaningful sense." "When did you arrive in Seattle?" "About 8 months ago." "And you've been homeless all this time?" Auguste nodded. "I chose that life, Ms. Chen. It wasn't something that happened to me, it was something I embraced because I didn't believe I deserved anything better." Elena stepped forward. "Auguste, you don't have to." "It's all right," Auguste said gently. "If this story is going to be told, it should be told truthfully." Sarah leaned forward. "What changed? What brought you to Lemire?" Auguste looked around the kitchen, at Elena and Marcus and Jake, at the space that had become his sanctuary. "Desperation," he said with a slight smile. "They needed help, and I needed to feel useful again. It was supposed to be just one night. But you stayed." "I stayed because they offered me something I thought I'd lost forever, the chance to care about something again." "Are you planning to return to fine dining? Open another restaurant?" "I am fine dining," Auguste said simply. "This is my restaurant now, in partnership with Elena. We're creating something here that honors both of our experiences." Sarah's eyes lit up. "So you're officially coming out of retirement?" Auguste exchanged glances with Elena, and she nodded encouragingly. "I'm officially coming back to life," he said. "Auguste Laurent died in a car accident 15 years ago. But Auguste, just Auguste, is learning to live again. And what would you want people to know about these lost years?" Auguste considered this carefully. "I would want them to know that talent without purpose is meaningless. That losing everything can teach you what really matters. And that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to start over." Sarah turned off her recorder. "Auguste, this is going to be a significant story. Are you prepared for the attention it will bring?" "I'm prepared for whatever comes," Auguste replied. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "The focus should be on the present, not the past. On what we're building here, not what was lost. And Elena Rodriguez should be given equal billing in any story about this restaurant. She took a chance on someone with no references and no permanent address. That says more about character than any Michelin star ever could." Sarah smiled. "I think I can work with that." As she prepared to leave, Auguste called after her. "Ms. Chen, when will this story be published?" "Next week, probably. The editor wants to run it as a cover story." After Sarah left, the kitchen remained quiet for several minutes. Auguste stood at his prep station, hands folded, processing what had just happened. "How do you feel?" Elena asked. Auguste thought about it carefully. "Terrified," he said finally. "And hopeful." And ready. Ready for what? Ready to find out who Auguste Laurent becomes when he stops running from Auguste Laurent. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with the force of a culinary earthquake. The cover of Food and Wine magazine featured a black and white photograph of Auguste working at his pastry station, his hands focused on delicate sugar work, his face showing the intense concentration that had become his signature. The headline read, "Auguste Laurent, the resurrection of a culinary legend." By 8 a.m., Lumiere's phone was ringing constantly. By 9 a.m., there were 3 news vans parked outside. By 10 a.m., the restaurant's reservation system had crashed from the volume of booking requests. Auguste stood at the kitchen window, watching the media circus unfold outside with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. For 15 years, he had been invisible. Now, suddenly, he was the center of attention for the entire culinary world. Second thoughts? Elena asked, joining him at the window. Every minute, Auguste admitted. But I'm not running. Marcus burst through the kitchen doors, his phone in one hand and a stack of printouts in the other. We've got interview requests from 63 different media outlets. The Today Show wants you for Thursday. Food Network is offering you your own show. And someone from the James Beard Foundation called about a Lifetime Achievement Award. Auguste turned away from the window. What did you tell them? That we'd get back to them. But Auguste, some of these offers are incredible. Life-changing money. I don't want life-changing money, Auguste said quietly. I want a life worth living. Elena smiled. What does that look like to you? Before Auguste could answer, Amanda appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement and stress. There's a delegation here from the Seattle Tourism Board. And a man who says he's from the French consulate. And... She paused, checking her notes. 3 people who claim to be your former students who flew in from France overnight. Auguste's expression changed. My former students? They said to tell you that Chef Moreau, Chef Beaumont, and Chef Dubois are here to pay their respects. Auguste closed his eyes for a moment. These were names from his previous life, young chefs he had mentored at Le Coeur, people who had gone on to successful careers of their own. He hadn't spoken to any of them since his world collapsed. They're waiting in the dining room, Amanda continued. They said they'll wait as long as necessary. Auguste looked at Elena. Will you come with me? Of course. They walked into the dining room together, and Auguste felt his breath catch. The 3 people waiting for him were no longer the eager young cooks he remembered, but accomplished chefs in their own right. They stood when they saw him, their faces showing a mixture of joy, relief, and deep emotion. Chef, said Michel Moreau, Auguste's former sous chef, tears already forming in his eyes. We thought we had lost you forever. Auguste found himself embraced by the 3 chefs who had once been like children to him. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by the flood of memories, late nights in the kitchen, teaching moments, shared successes, the family they had created at Le Coeur. Michel, Bridget, Henri, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You came all this way. When we saw the article this morning, said Bridget Beaumont, now the head chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Paris, we got on the first flight we could find. We needed to see for ourselves that you were all right. More than all right, added Henri Dubois, not the Henri from Vancouver, but a different Henri, one of Auguste's most promising students. The article says you're cooking again. Really cooking? Auguste nodded. I am. Thanks to these people. He gestured to Elena, Marcus, and the rest of the Lumiere team. They gave me a chance when no one else would. Michel looked around the restaurant with a professional eye. May we see your kitchen? We'd like to understand what you've built here. For the next hour, Auguste gave his former students a tour of Lumiere's operation, explaining the menu concepts he and Elena had developed, the techniques they were using, the philosophy behind their collaboration. His former students listened with the same attention they had given him 20 years earlier, asking questions and offering insights. "Chef," Bridget said as they finished the tour, "this is extraordinary work. You haven't lost anything. If anything, your cooking has gained depth." "Loss teaches things that success cannot," Auguste replied. "I understand flavors differently now. I understand what food means to people." "Would you consider coming back to France?" Michel asked carefully. "I could arrange backing for a new restaurant. Full creative control, unlimited budget." Auguste looked at Elena, then back at his former students. "I appreciate the offer, Michel. But my place is here now. This is my restaurant, with Elena. We're building something together." Henri, the student, nodded respectfully. "Then perhaps we could arrange for some of our younger chefs to stage here? To learn from both of you?" Elena's face lit up. "We'd be honored." As the afternoon wore on, more visitors arrived. Food critics who had traveled across the country to eat at Lumiere. Chefs from other cities who wanted to pay their respects. Even some of Auguste's former customers from Le Coeur, who had somehow tracked him down. But the most surprising visitor arrived just before dinner service. An elderly woman, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, walked into the restaurant with the bearing of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. Auguste was in the kitchen when Amanda announced her arrival. "There's a woman here to see you," Amanda said. "She says her name is Auguste Laurent." Auguste dropped the whisk he was holding. It clattered on the stainless steel counter, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent kitchen. "That's impossible," he whispered. "She says she's your aunt. She has identification." Auguste had thought Marguerite was dead. She had been his father's sister, a formidable woman who had helped raise him after his parents died. He hadn't spoken to anyone from his family since the accident, cutting all ties in his grief and guilt. "She's waiting in the private dining room," Amanda said gently. Auguste looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "Go," she said. "I'll handle prep for tonight." Auguste walked slowly to the private dining room, his mind racing. Auguste Laurent had been like a mother to him, the person who had first taught him to cook, who had encouraged his culinary ambitions. Seeing her again would be like confronting every choice he had made over the past 15 years. She stood when he entered the room, and Auguste was struck by how little she had changed. She was 83 years old now, but her posture was still straight, her gaze still penetrating. "Auguste," she said simply. "Aunt Marguerite." He hadn't spoken French in years, but the words came naturally. "I read the article this morning. I caught the first flight from Lyon." They stood facing each other across the room, 15 years of separation and pain between them. "I thought you were dead," she said finally. "I was," Auguste replied. "For a long time, I was." Marguerite studied his face carefully. "And now?" Auguste thought about the question seriously. "Now I'm learning to live again." "Show me," she said. "Show me what you've learned." Auguste led Marguerite into the kitchen, where the dinner service was beginning to build momentum. Elena looked up from her station and immediately understood the significance of this elderly woman who carried herself with the same quiet authority as Auguste. "Aunt," Auguste said in French, "this is Elena Rodriguez, my partner and the head chef of Lumiere." Marguerite studied Elena with the same penetrating gaze she had given Auguste. "You are the one who gave my nephew a second chance." "Actually," Elena replied, "I think we gave each other a second chance." Marguerite smiled for the first time since arriving. "I like her," she said to Auguste. "Everyone ready for service?" Auguste called to the kitchen staff, switching back to his role as pastry chef and kitchen coordinator. But Marguerite's presence had changed something in him. He moved with more confidence, spoke with more authority. The young chef she had once mentored was visible again beneath the careful restraint he had developed over the years. "May I observe?" Marguerite asked. "Of course." What followed was one of the most extraordinary dinner services in Lumiere's history. Auguste and Elena worked together with a synchronization that spoke of deep professional respect, calling out timing, adjusting flavors, coordinating presentations with an almost telepathic understanding. The kitchen moved like a well-oiled machine, every member of the staff performing at their highest level. But it was Auguste's dessert course that left Marguerite speechless. He had created what he called Memory of Home, a deconstructed tart tatin that told the story of his childhood in his aunt's kitchen. Caramelized apples were arranged to look like fallen leaves, accompanied by cinnamon ice cream shaped like small birds, and delicate pastry work that recreated the pattern of his aunt's favorite tablecloth. When he presented the dessert to Marguerite, she took one bite and began to cry. "You remember," she whispered in French. "I remember everything," Auguste replied. "I just forgot how to let myself feel it." The dinner service ended with a standing ovation from the dining room, something that had become common since Auguste's identity was revealed, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a celebration not just of exceptional food, but of redemption and renewal. After the last customer left and the kitchen was cleaned, Marguerite sat with Auguste and Elena in the empty dining room, sharing stories of Auguste's childhood and early culinary training. He was 6 years old when he first tried to make soup, Marguerite told Elena. He dragged a chair to the stove, climbed up, and announced he was going to cook dinner for the family. Nearly burned down the kitchen, but the soup was actually quite good. "What made you think Auguste might still be alive?" Elena asked. Marguerite was quiet for a moment. A mother's intuition, even for a nephew. "Every few years, I would hear rumors, a homeless man who cooked with unusual skill, a kitchen worker who knew techniques he shouldn't have known. I hired investigators, but they never found anything concrete." She looked at Auguste. "You were very good at disappearing." "I had practice," Auguste said quietly. "Why didn't you come home? After Marie and Sophie died, why didn't you come to family?" Auguste struggled with the question. "Because I was ashamed. Because I felt responsible. Because I thought I didn't deserve comfort or forgiveness. And now?" Auguste looked around the restaurant, at Elena who had become like a sister to him, at the kitchen where he had found purpose again, at the photographs on the wall showing happy customers enjoying meals he had helped create. "Now I understand that isolation is not penance," he said. "It's just another form of death." Marguerite reached across the table and took his hand. "Your mother would be proud of what you've built here. Marie and Sophie would be proud." Auguste felt tears welling up, but for the first time in 15 years, they weren't tears of grief alone. They were tears of possibility. "And," he said, "would you consider staying in Seattle for a while? There's so much I want to show you, so much I want to share." "I was hoping you would ask," she replied. "I have nowhere else to be." Elena watched this reunion with deep emotion, understanding that she was witnessing something sacred, the reconnection of family, the healing of wounds that had seemed permanent. "Auguste," she said gently, "there's something I want to propose." "What is it?" "The French chefs who visited today, the offers from investors, the media attention, it's all pointing towards something bigger than just Lumiere. What if we created something that could help other people the way this place helped you?" "What do you mean?" "A culinary school. A place where people who have lost their way can learn not just cooking techniques, but how to rebuild their lives through food. We could partner with social services, addiction recovery programs, veteran organizations." Auguste stared at her, his mind racing through the possibilities. "A school for second chances." "Exactly. We could call it the Laurent Institute. Use your name, your story, your expertise to help people who are where you were." Marguerite leaned forward. "Auguste, This is exactly what your parents would have wanted. They always believed that food was about bringing people together, about healing. Auguste was quiet for a long time, considering the magnitude of what Elena was proposing. It would mean fully embracing his identity as Auguste Laurent again, accepting the responsibility that came with that name. It would mean trusting in a future he had never imagined possible. There would be conditions, he said finally. Name them, Elena replied. Elena would be my equal partner in everything. Co-founder, co-director, complete creative collaboration. Agreed. We start small. One program at a time, one student at a time. We don't try to save everyone, we just try to save the ones who are ready to save themselves. Of course. And we never forget that this is about the students, not about us. The moment this becomes about our egos or our reputations, we stop. Elena smiled. Auguste Laurent, would you like to change the world, one meal at a time? Auguste looked at his aunt, whose face was glowing with pride. He looked at Elena, who had become his closest friend and most trusted collaborator. He looked around the restaurant that had saved his life and given him purpose. Yes, he said simply. I think I would. 6 months later, the Laurent Institute opened its doors in a converted warehouse space adjacent to Lumiere. The first class consisted of 12 students, veterans struggling with PTSD, people in recovery from addiction, individuals experiencing homelessness, young people aging out of foster care. Auguste stood in front of his first class, wearing chef's whites that bore his full name for the first time in 15 years. Next to him stood Elena, Marguerite, and several of his former students who had relocated to Seattle to help with the program. Cooking, Auguste began, addressing his students, is not just about feeding people. It's about caring for people. About creating something beautiful from basic ingredients. About transforming raw materials into nourishment. He paused, looking around at the faces before him, faces that showed hope mixed with uncertainty, determination mixed with fear. Many of you are here because something in your life has been broken. I understand that feeling. I lived with it for 15 years. But I want you to know that broken things can be mended, and sometimes they become stronger in the places where they were cracked. He picked up a knife, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. Today, we begin with the basics. How to hold a knife safely. How to make a proper cut. How to build flavors layer by layer. But what we're really learning is how to build a life, choice by choice, day by day. Auguste looked out the window at Elliott Bay, where the afternoon sun was creating diamonds on the water. Somewhere in the distance, he could almost hear the voices of Marie and Sophie, not in grief this time, but in encouragement. They would want him to share what he had learned, to use his gifts to help others find their way back to themselves. Who's ready to cook? He asked his students. 12 hands raised in the air, and Auguste Laurent, teacher, chef, survivor, smiled.